previously on our community's newsletter.
And there was this growth spurt to clear brush, change it from ranching and fenced land into a marvelous agricultural land, and bring farmers in here to do it. And a whole group, a whole diaspora of Anglo farmers from the Midwest and the North came down here to farm in this more temperate climate and this rich soil.
The water system in the valley was always the tool of promoters because they knew that irrigation was a mode of fulfilling potential for their land that they were out there acquiring.
The Willacy County area was remote from the Rio Grande River. It had no border on the flow of the water, no claim to the water or use of the water.
But they did not buy the water rights per se. They went to the state and petitioned for them, and they were granted. They ended up having to settle for secondary rights.
They were claiming the water that was lost into the Gulf of Mexico during the 2 flood stages of the Rio Grande River.
What they did was they got taxed on their improvements. And some of those private companies went bankrupt, so they evolved from private efforts into public efforts like Delta Lake Irrigation District to avoid being taxed by the county and the state and anybody, so that they could work and put all their money into the improvement.
In 1925, plans were started to irrigate 200,000 acres of land in Willacy County. With floodwaters from the Rio Grande River, it would be comprised of the old Union Irrigation District in Willacy County that would distribute water pumped from the river at times of flood to a reservoir, then throughout the canals and laterals.
Hi, I'm Dave Osborne, CEO of Valley Telephone Cooperative. The 1920s saw a migration of farmers from the Midwestern United States to Willacy County. Places such as this, the Delta Lake Clubhouse, hosted trainloads of prospective buyers, lured here by land promoters and promises of rich soil, an ideal growing climate, and a proposed irrigation system, the largest the world had ever seen, which would bring water all the way from the Rio Grande River some 30 miles away. This endeavor would be the greatest engineering project the Valley had ever seen, providing a water capacity of over 250,000 acre-feet. In a grand gesture of confidence, a loan was approved and $7.5 million worth of bonds were issued.
That was to build the irrigation system, the pump house at the river, the canal from the river to Delta Lake, and to dredge the Delta Lake and install the gravity canals from there and the concrete pipeline to the fields.
A committee was formed comprised of the best and brightest Willacy County had to offer. W.A. Harding was chosen to see the project through to completion. The task of surveying the county went to Alfred Tam, the civil engineer out of Harlingen who had worked most of the Rio Grande Valley.
I will tell you that Alfred Tam, the guy that was the engineer from Sturt Place, is where he was from, was a magician as far as surveying and everything for elevations and everything else. I tell you, I don't know how, but he must have ridden a lot of horses, a lot of places, and gone a lot of things, because to me it's been remarkably accurate. And it's been, I mean, that guy was just, well, he put his name to the paper that he was right.
The nationally known company, Morgan Engineering from Memphis, Tennessee, designed this system. The main ditch from the river to the reservoir would be 140 feet wide and 14 feet deep, with a capacity of 3,000 second feet, equivalent to 6,000 acre feet per day, equal to the flow of the water sufficient to cover a piece of land 2 miles wide by 5 miles long and a depth of 1 foot in 24 hours. Trinity Farms Construction of Fort Worth bid and got the contract to construct the Willacy County Water Control and Improvement District Number 1. This contract called for the movement of 14 million cubic yards of dirt and 21 million square feet of concrete.
To put that in perspective, the Hoover Dam contains 3.25 million cubic yards of concrete. The amount of dirt displaced by the Willacy County Water Control and Improvement District Number 1 was 4.3 times that. Construction started on July 3, 1929. Board members were on hand to witness the groundbreaking.
There weren't very many good earth-moving pieces of equipment. So what did they do? They went out here, and this land under the lake was farmland. It was pasture land. And they went out with drag lines and started. And they had one on the outside and one on the inside, and they were cutting dirt and they were making a border and building it up to a certain height. And they went around their designated perimeter, and that's what they did. They made a levee and a place to store water out there just because they decided that's it.
On August 1929, a big reservoir was under construction with 3 giant dredges about 3 miles east of Hargill. They were working 24 hours a day, creating the basin that would cover 1,500 acres of land at about 15 acre feet, which was later be called Delta Lakes. The dirt was thrown to one side, and another machine packed the dike full of wet clay to seal the levees around the lake. It was estimated by June 1932 the vast acreage included in the district would be receiving irrigation water. The entire district, with the exception of a few high points watered by booster pumps, would be irrigated by gravity with floodwaters taken from the Rio Grande River.
For a year and a half, man and machine toiled endlessly, digging and packing and reshaping the earth beneath their feet. Then, on December 19, 1930, for the first time in history, water flowed from the Rio Grande up north to the Delta Lake Reservoir. Nat Wetzel, president of the Willacy County Water Users Association, welcomed a crowd of 200 to the Delta Orchards Clubhouse to celebrate and inspect the 52 miles of canals that were ready to transport water. W.A. Harding was given 3 cheers for his dedication to the completion of the project.
They got this dream, and I'll tell you, whoever dreamt this up, or the committee of people that dreamt this up, were bright people, and they were workers, because they would have never put it together if they hadn't been dreamers and workers. But they did it.
When we return, the shadow of the Great Depression falls over Willacy County and its dreams of an irrigation system.
So, same time next week? Well, of course.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1,000,000. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
So I've come up with a family emergency plan.
Great. What is it?
It's difficult to talk about, so I'm not telling you.
How will we know what to do?
You won't.
I'm so glad I won't have to remember anything.
And me too. Thanks for this, sweetie.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all working with United Way for a million little reasons. The kids of our communities, to ensure their academic success all the way to graduation day. You see, it takes about 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a kid becoming one or the other could be a professional athlete, or it could be you. Studies showed the earlier we get to kids, the better their chances. So become a United Way volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, and make a difference in the life of a child, for the life of that child.
Give.
Advocate.
Volunteer.
Live United. Join your favorite NFL players. Take the pledge. Go to unitedway.org.
Clean kitchen surfaces, utensils, and hands with soapy water. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Want to know more about interesting people and places in South Texas? Follow me on a journey of inspiration and insight that will offer a deeper connection with people and businesses in our community.
This is called scary situation now. This is not an easy business.
Don't miss new episodes of Backroad Reporter with Annie Studebaker on VTX TV Channel 1.
Welcome back. The early 1930s saw great progress with Willacy County's irrigation system. In December of 1930, awestruck crowds witnessed water from the Rio Grande filling the first reservoir units at Delta Lake and celebrated. However, in the era of the Great Depression, such festivities were always short-lived.
And at this same time, the economy was starting to crumble.
Yeah, stock market crash and all.
Yeah.
The depression is fixing to hit.
Yeah, and so all these plans and these preparations for the irrigation district and the borrowing of the $7.5 million from the government for the bond to do this project all fell at this really bad time in the economy of the United States.
Well, they got the water district voted in. And then later, as it's developed, why some of the people changed their mind. Because they didn't want to be involved in the water district and end up paying taxes, and the depression was darn hard.
The original plan was to go to Hargill, Rollo, La Serra, Raymondville, Santa Margarita, Willamar, and south to Lyford and Sebastian.
And so they removed about 1/3 of this water district, took it out. And that is a huge section that goes from the east side of the main canal back over there, and it was about 50,000 acres that they took out. I can't remember the particular year, but anyway, they took that out and reduced the acreage from about 150, 160,000 acres to just under 100,000 acres. But one of the conditions were to let those people out from paying or being a part of the water district was that they had to pay the money that was assessed against the water district for flat rate and taxes to pay off the election of getting the water district formed. So in effect, those people that had that acreage bought out of the water district and chose not to be a part of it.
And to make matters worse, in 1932, floodwaters from the Rio Grande River engulfed Willacy County.
In 1932, there was a flood on the Rio Grande River, and the water overflowed its banks, and it came across country, and it flooded through Sebastian up to Lyford and up to across the highway in Raymondville, and went on east through its normal drainage to the Gulf of Mexico. And so at that point, they could be pumping floodwater. And also, the river also at that same time overflowed its banks on the south side into Mexico, and the Mexican Army struggled trying to hold the dikes to keep the water from getting any worse. In 1933, it was announced in Washington on December the 5th that work on this huge irrigation project was suspended. The work had started 5 years earlier, but the sale of the bonds had been slow during the years of the Great Depression. Land sales tapered off, and many parcels of land were returned to the promoters for lack of payment.
The committee took their plight to the Public Works Administration. After hearing their story, the PWA approved a loan of $4.8 million to complete the project.
Loans of $4.8 million from the Public Works Administration would help to complete the irrigation project. This loan would employ 4,000 men for 18 months. An amount approved included a direct 30% grant.
A little more than a year later, a grand jury convened in Washington, D.C. with the purpose of investigating a scandal. The committee charged with overseeing the irrigation project had been accused of fraud in respect to the building materials used for the pipes and lining.
Different material was considered for the project. Concrete canal linings and pipes were one consideration. Another idea involved the use of California redwood lumber for canal lining and wooden pipes for lateral delivery. There would be 500 miles of canals and pipelines serving 1,200 landowners in the district. The job would be awarded to many contracts in order to speed the work.
Prosecutors alleged that the defendants had made a special deal with the California Lumber Company, using $4.8 million of government loan money to purchase inferior redwood rather than concrete, as called for by the original proposal.
There was a grand jury trial in Washington, D.C. on February the 6th, 1935. They dug into the first major public works scandal involving an alleged conspiracy to use 200 miles of California redwood pipe in a Texas irrigation project that originally called for no pipe at all. The plot centered on a $4.8 million grant. Texas politicians and California lumbermen were parties to the conspiracy suit that Administrator Harold L. Ickes instituted in a grand jury action. It had been understood that the Willacy County project would be gravity irrigation system requiring no pipe. Then, after papers were assigned, the plans were mysteriously altered to make it a pressure system requiring 200 miles of redwood pipe. The redwood was charged as an inferior material and for such purposes and would deteriorate before the PWA had gotten back half of its money. 10 million board feet of redwood was to be furnished by the Hammond Lumber Company. 4 kinds of pipe were under consideration for the work: concrete, redwood, creosote wood, and steel. Redwood was naturally given consideration as it was used extensively in California. and throughout the West for irrigation projects. But that plan was abandoned. Mr. R.E. Thompson, former Texas State Highway engineer in charge of the Texas PWA district, said, "Just some more of Secretary Ickey's ballyhoo. He has the corps of investigators down here trying to dig up something. 7 men were indicted with conspiracy to defraud the government in an irrigation project in Willacy County. Those indicted were Charles R. Oldberg and Perry Welty of Austin, Texas, former PWA employees, William A. Harding of Raymondville, Frank P. McElrath of Corsicana, Harry W. Cole, president of the California Redwood Association, and Larry C. Hammond and James P. Berry of San Francisco, California. Some of the government charges were that defendants conspired unlawfully to cause PWA to reject plans for the gravity, concrete, and open canals in Willacy County land. They conspired to write new plans for the closed distribution conduit that only California redwood could be used. There are several other charges involved in this. And there was a Supreme Court of the District of Columbia case styled United States of America versus William A. Harding et al. This was quashed or suppressed, and all the men were acquitted. The verdict favored the men on all of the federal counts. Defense attorneys said it was a material man's fight, originated by T. Hill Harbin, former Trinity Farms Construction Company official.
Ultimately, the defendants were found not guilty.
Harding met with so many delays in the PWA office through which he was forced to follow that he resigned himself to the selection of any material which he felt would last the life of the bonds imposed on the district, 35 years. In the jury's opinion, the verdict returned to Justice F. Dickerson Letts. None of the defendants were guilty of any of the counts. By 1935, I was 7 years old, and I traveled with my parents and grandparents, and we visited Washington, D.C. and New York City. I thought we were sightseeing, but it turned out that my grandfather was involved in this case, which they figured was too complicated to explain to a 7-year-old. So I never learned what this was all about until years later in my research for this book, what I just repeated, what I had read in the research.
With the charges dismissed, the construction was allowed to continue. In 1938, the Mercedes pump house was completed.
Right here is the river. Of course, we're standing on the U.S. side. That's the Mexico side right there. This weir was built to help hold the water up for Delta Lake and Mercedes when we're pumping, to give our pumps a little better capacity. This is Delta Lake's pumping facility. This is where we lift the water out of the river, and then we pump it. Let's go inside the pump house and we'll show you the pumps. This is our pumping plant where we relift the water. Pump the water out of the river. We have a series of 4 160 CFS pumps with 450 horsepower motors that pump the water for Delta Lake Irrigation District. And then fill our main canal to gravity feed to our other 2 lakes and to the land within the district.
The completion of the pump house marked the end of construction for the Delta Lake irrigation system. For the first time in history, the people of Willacy County had direct access to the Rio Grande River, granting them a reliable water supply for their homes and farms. A park opened up on the shores of Delta Lake, offering a place for valley residents to take their families for swimming, fishing, and boating.
I lived at Elsa. I grew up down there, but I used to always come out here after there was water in the lake and go fishing and swimming. One of the grandest experiences we always had was every time we had a chance, we'd go to what was called Four Corners and go swimming. That was where the canal dumped into the east reservoir, and there was always water in the canal, and most of the time, why, it was about head deep, 6 or 7 feet deep. Good swimming, a lot of fun. When the Delta Lake was made, there was a drag line on the inside and a drag line on the outside. They made the common border, and there was a channel on the inside where they'd taken the dirt out, which was a death trap when people went swimming.
You wouldn't hit bottom there.
Well, you know, the bottom might be twice as wide as this room and twice as deep, or maybe as deep. And you'd be over here on safe ground, and all of a sudden there'd be a hole there. And if you didn't know how to swim, you might have a lot of trouble. So there was a period of time when the lake was filled. Well, it lasted for about 30-some years, where it was an unusual year. There wasn't at least one person drowned in Delta Lake. And sometimes it'd be several. Because as time went on and water conditions changed, the bottom of that lake shifted in and filled most of those holes. And yet, for years, there was holes out there that were still there because it was not filled in mechanically whenever it was dug. And people would come and go swimming, go fishing. They stocked the lake as soon as they could stock it with fish. They had bass and catfish and gaspergoo. It's a little white fish about 9 or 10 inches long when it's grown. Very good eating. And I don't know why they haven't continued to have it stocked, but anyway, that was the fish, one of the fishes that they had.
Good times had come to Willacy County. The plan to use floodwater to irrigate the land was a rousing success. But what would happen when the federal government strove to control floodwaters nationwide? More when we return.
Millions of people are affected by disaster in America. And we're right there, providing food. With more than 200 food banks, reaching communities all across America. Donate now for immediate relief and long-term recovery. Every dollar helps provide food for disaster victims. Help now at feedingamerica.org.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your closet. Still no jobs, just more stuff? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs.
Nothing brings a community together like high school football, and no one brings the games home but VTX. This fall, VTX1 is launching Channel 25, our new sports and educational network featuring high school football games from the communities in our area, starting with the Bearcats of Raymondville and the Bulldogs of Lyford. VTX1's new sports and educational network, Channel 25, is sure to become a household favorite on the VTX1 cable system with programming you're sure to enjoy. So tune in to the new VTX Sports and Educational Network today.
You're watching VTX TV.
Want to know more about interesting people and places in South Texas? Follow me on a journey of inspiration and insight that will offer a deeper connection with people and businesses in our community.
This is called scary situation now. This is not an easy business.
Don't miss new episodes of Backroad Reporter with Annie Studebaker on VTX TV Channel 1.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Though the Delta Lake irrigation system was created to take advantage of any flooding in the Rio Grande, those floods often brought about catastrophic damage to the valley. By the 1940s, the federal government had taken a keen interest in building flood control dams all across the country. The Flood Control Act of 1936 defined the public interest like this.
It is hereby recognized that destructive floods upon the rivers of the United States constitute a menace to national welfare. That is the sense of Congress that flood control on navigable waters or their tributaries is a proper activity of the federal government.
On February 3, 1944, the United States and Mexico signed the Treaty for the Utilization of Waters of the Colorado and Tijuana Rivers and the Rio Grande. This authorized the construction of a dam near Falcon, Texas, for the purposes of water flood control, water regulation and storage, and hydroelectric generation. The treaty established the International Boundary and Water Commission, or IBWC, to oversee those responsibilities.
Well, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And then when you have the riparian water rights and you have it on the border between two countries, you have to share.
Right.
They each have a watershed into that river system, and each are entitled to their own share, and they've contributed to the construction of the dam. So there's a gigantic government organization designed to try to solve this relationship about whose water is whose.
Right.
Both nations agreed to pay the cost of Falcon Dam, and construction began in December of 1950. It wasn't easy work.
Now, the floodway system had a great deal of WPA money on it, Works Progress money. But I can remember I had relatives that worked in that project. They're working on the segment east of La Villa going south toward Mercedes and north also. Because I can remember my cousin telling me that he worked on it, and he worked on it under this terms. It was $1 a day, and you brought your own shovel. And you ran dirt. Now, if you wanted more money, you could bring 2 mules or 2 horses so that you could work a Fresno, and you would get $2 a day for you and your 2 mules or horses.
Tell us what a Fresno is.
You don't know what a Fresno is?
Like
No, that's a slip if you got 2 handles.
I thought like a wheelbarrow with no wheel, and you drug it and you flipped it over and
A slip is a small scoop which has a framework so that with one animal you can pull a slip, and you push it down and slide it on its seat, and it'll hold about 1/4 of a yard of dirt. A Fresno is big enough that it will pull 3/4 of a yard of dirt, and most of those had what we called a tail, which was an iron bar hooked on the back with a rope on it, and the animals would pull it, and you would pull it down to get a bite of dirt, And if you got too much or hit a hard place or hit a stump, invariably you lost control of your tail of this deal and it was a calamity. You either got hit or you just lost it and got thrown away. But you had to go reload regardless. But it would slide dirt from one locale to another, and you would pile dirt up on the border. And that's the way that was made, because there was no ditch by drag lines making the border like it was around Delta Lake.
Falcon Dam and the floodway system were built yard by yard over the span of a few years. At the end of the third year, the presidents and dignitaries of the United States and Mexico gathered at the dam for a celebration.
In 1953, there was a ceremony at Falcon Dam, and that reservoir in the Rio Grande River. It was dedicated in October 19th, 1953, by President Dwight D. Eisenhower and President Adolfo Ruiz Cortines of Mexico.
As we meet here to dedicate this great structure to the use of our two peoples, I prize the opportunity of meeting you personally. Such works as this are created in the hearts of the citizens of two nations, citizens who respect and believe in one another. They are brought with the most precious coin in the world, the goodwill among peoples.
Construction on Falcon Dam was officially completed on April 8, 1954, but it was estimated that the dam wouldn't be filled to capacity until 1959 or 1960.
They built that and finished it in July of '54. They finished it. I have a personal memory of that. I was a broke farmer with a wife and two kids, trying to make a living, but not knowing how or what to do. And I finished irrigating on the last day of June. And I loaded my wife and two little children up in the car and went to the bank in San Juan and gave them a check and took off and went to Uvalde to Garner State Park. And we drove through Laredo and went up to Uvalde to the park. We had no radio in the car. There was no television. And when we came back through Laredo on July the 4th, because we had to get out of the Garner State Park, we didn't have a reservation over July 4th, we had to get out. A flood had come through Laredo and washed a whole bunch of that business district away.
While Mr. Galloway was vacationing in Garner State Park, Hurricane Alice had swept through South Texas. Though it was only a Category 1 storm, 153 people lost their lives to the flooding.
It was Hurricane Alice, and it came through right behind me as I went out. I didn't feel, hear, or anything about it. And when we got down to Falcon Dam, there was a whole lot of water in the lake, and I drove off the road up to the dam. The gates to fill the dam, to hold the water in the dam, were in a stack over here on the ground, and they were putting posts or stop logs in a space that was made for this to hold the water in. They successfully held the water in the dam with stop logs with the gates on the ground because they didn't have the equipment to pick them up and set them in place.
All those people that were living in the little communities, they all had to get out of there in a hurry.
In a hell of a hurry. They were supposed to have been out of there already.
Yeah.
But they really had to shake it and bake it and get it going. But the lake filled in 3 weeks. When it had been discussed, it'd probably take 5 to 6 years to fill the lake. Yeah. And it filled in 3 weeks because of that damn rain that came that I didn't even know about happened until it, and that was 4 days of just forgotten vacation that was all gone, see? And then here comes back to all of that stuff that later made so much difference in our lives out here. But I've always thought that that was a miracle that somebody had common sense enough to have those stop logs there, and then more than that, sense enough to get them in place. But that was the way that happened, and I know because, like I said, I had a real dateline to remember it by.
The flooding caused by Hurricane Alice was actually a mixed blessing. Filling the reservoir to capacity had only taken 3 weeks instead of the estimated 5 to 6 years. However, while it was undoubtedly a good turn of events to the farmers of the Rio Grande Valley, it raised some very important questions. If Delta Lake Irrigation was entitled to floodwater from the Rio Grande, what did it mean that so much floodwater was now being held in the Falcon Reservoir? If the river no longer overflowed its banks, what did that mean for Willacy County? How much of the water belonged to the people of Willacy County, and how much belonged to the rest of the people along the river?
As I said, everything evolves. And everybody got into a big scrap after the lake was filled and everything else. And so there was a water suit filed that was presided over by Judge Starley. It was provided in our court. And I can't tell you the exact year, but I think it was settled in 1969. Okay, and they decided, in our particular case, that any water that we had, or any water that would have gone into the Gulf of Mexico because it wasn't used, was water that should have been given to us. Okay, and how do you measure and divide water in a glass? Okay, is your water on the top half of the glass or on the bottom half of the glass, and which is your water and which is everybody else? So they decided that they put our water rights for surplus water, because we had an old claim and then we had a newer subsequent claim. They put us in this area on an equal basis with all of the old water rights in the Rio Grande Valley because the circumstances had changed by the flood. So we had a legitimate claim to every cup of water that was in the lake up there. And so, not to better our situation, but to make us all equal, everybody's right was classified as an A water right by Judge Starley in 1969. And so there but that's when that was stabilized. And then we've been under a water master that works under jurisdiction of a court since.
Willacy County now had every bit as much of a right to the Rio Grande water as anyone else. The water master would regulate the distribution of water to the various counties, releasing it from the dam as needed, and the farmers and ranchers had a guaranteed supply with which they could make a living. Join us next time as we delve into the inner workings of the irrigation system and explore the process of how water from the Rio Grande finds its way to Willacy County and the people of our communities. I'm Dave Osborne. Until next time. Special thanks to Mrs. R.E. Harding. Her lifetime of collecting articles, and pictures literally made this episode possible.
Millions of people are affected by disaster in America. And we're right there, providing food. With more than 200 food banks, reaching communities all across America. Donate now for immediate relief and long-term recovery. Every dollar helps provide food for disaster victims. Help now at feedingamerica.org.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your closet. Still no jobs, just more stuff? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs.
Nothing brings a community together like high school football, and no one brings the games home but VTX. This fall, VTX1 is launching Channel 25, our new sports and educational network featuring high school football games from the communities in our area, starting with the Bearcats of Raymondville and the Bulldogs of Lyford. VTX1's new sports and educational network, Channel 25, is sure to become a household favorite on the VTX1 cable system with programming you're sure to enjoy. So tune in to the new VTX Sports and Educational Network today.
You're watching VTX TV.
Want to know more about interesting people and places in South Texas? Follow me on a journey of inspiration and insight that will offer a deeper connection with people and businesses in our community.
This is called a scary situation now. This is not an easy business.
Don't miss new episodes of Backroad Reporter with Annie Studebaker on VTX TV Channel 1.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.